You invest all your life, all your money into this cow herd, this ranch, the fence, the pickups, and in one split second, just because somebody's too cheap to replace a pole, your whole livelihood is burned up.
On February 26th, a downed utility pole sparked a fire deep in the Texas Panhandle. Fueled by high winds and tall, dry grasses, the fire quickly spread east. Within 3 weeks, the Smokehouse Creek fire had engulfed more than 1 million acres.
Tonight, the Smokehouse Creek wildfire in the Panhandle is officially the biggest in Texas history.
This heartbreaking video shows the raging flames destroying homes, farms, and buildings.
An investigation into how the Smokehouse Creek fire was ignited found damning evidence pointing in one direction.
That pole hitting the ground lit the grass on fire, and that's what started the Smokehouse fire.
The pole in question is owned by Xcel Energy, an electric utility and natural gas delivery company based in Minneapolis.
It was terrible for the neighbors and the community. We've burned up before, and some of the guys that lost all their cows in 17 lost all their cows again.
It's just struggle after struggle after struggle to sit here and operate. And my experience is personally, what is causing these fires, I think a lot of them are being caused by electrical infrastructure.
We're getting tired of being burned over and over and over again. When is enough enough?
We set out to investigate that very question. What can we do to ensure working class people don't bear the cost of wildfires caused by corporate negligence and greed? Jason Abraham, a cattle rancher in Canadian Texas, was one of the first volunteer firefighters on the scene when the Smokehouse Creek fire swept through his area.
We got some cows over here still.
Canadian Fire Department, we have reports of a grass fire at Mendota Road at the Abraham place. Repeating.
Okay, we've been fighting fire for about 2 days. We got a big fire, 100,000 acres, and the wind just shifted, and it's fixing to hit headquarters. Well, it's fixing to burn up the whole ranch. It come right into town and completely surrounded town, so the edges of town caught a lot of houses right around there, and it comes in really hard and fast. Well, it blocked both highways. You couldn't get out of Canadian.
At an investigative hearing on the Smokehouse Creek fire, Xcel recognized that their pole ignited the fire, but refused to claim responsibility.
The pole failed, but we were not negligent in our care of the pole, given the high winds that occurred on that day.
So it was your pole and it fell, and the winds blew it down. Is that correct? But you weren't negligent.
That is what we say, and that is our position.
All right, I just want that to be digested.
Dig a little bit deeper, and you'll see that the pole that started the Smokehouse Creek fire was not properly maintained.
Xcel and those kind of power companies, I realize they're really old, but they don't replace them because it costs money. I mean, it's almost like a joke. It's like, well, why didn't, the pole's rotten down there at the bottom. Well, instead of replacing the pole, we just chip it out. That's how cheap they are. It's like, we chip it out.
It's standard practice for utility companies to file down utility poles that are rotting out long before they are replaced.
Well, how much is too much chipping? Xcel won't tell me what their policy is, but apparently Osmos will go down to 45% of the tree.
Osmos is a company that Xcel contracts out their utility pole inspections to, and they're being accused of failing to properly inspect the pole that ignited the Smokehouse Creek fire. Representatives for Osmos refused to show at the Smokehouse Creek Fire Investigative Committee hearing in April.
Chair calls the elusive creature Osmos.
We have a chair.
Osmos. Osmos. Osmos? There's no Osmos.
So, not only was the pole inspected poorly, but it was marked by Xcel that it needed replacement. And that didn't happen in time.
Utilities have been tied to some of the most destructive wildfires in recent years. But in the West, what we've seen is that the potential for serious fire spread and destruction is greater because we've had, especially in California, but elsewhere as well, periods of very severe drought that scientists say pretty unequivocally have been exacerbated by climate change.
Negligence from power companies has compounded with environmental and political issues to create a hotbed of wildfire risk across the country.
So whether it's mismanagement or sort of ignorance or some combination thereof. Like there's certainly corporate accountability and responsibility issues here, layered on top of all of the other things that make this so challenging.
The wind has always blown here, and we've always had power lines. But we didn't have these fires in the 70s. We didn't have these fires in the 80s, and we didn't have them in the 90s. They started in the 2000s. The utility companies over the years have not maintained their infrastructure.
In the middle of our interview with Jason, another wildfire broke out on his ranch.
Oh, maybe that's Santa Fe setting on fire. We got a fire right there. That thing just blew up. Santa Fe just set that on fire just now.
That's on your property?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to go handle that?
Yeah, we can go down there and handle it.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah, let's go.
Yep. Santa Fe is the railroad that runs through Jason's property. He says that while most fires are caused by utilities, negligence from the railroad ignites fires all the time. So we are heading right now down the ranch because in the middle of our interview, we saw a fire light up on his property.
This is just the crap we put up with. Luckily, Xcel had already burnt me up.
All right, so what are we looking at?
So what we're looking at here, that part of the pole was under the ground. The rest of the pole burned off. So the fire blew through here and it burnt the whole pole down in lines, and it did this all the way down. So this is all burned up. You can see all the boxes and everything's all burned up. All that's burned up.
And this is from the Smokehouse Creek fire?
This is Smokehouse Creek, yeah.
Early estimates from the Smokehouse Creek fire point to hundreds of millions of dollars in damages. And this is nothing new in Texas and nationwide.
You're seeing more destructive fires happen more frequently. We're seeing really the greater prospect of substantial liability costs. California was really the first state to grapple with this in earnest, but we're beginning to see it in Oregon, Colorado, potentially Hawaii, likely Texas to an extent.
I'm surprised a lot of these landowners haven't killed themselves, because you see how much they lost. I mean, they lost millions.
As you can see, we're driving around on Mendota Ranch here, and all the area around us is burnt up. The fire swept through here, the Smokehouse Creek fire. And you'll see some green in the grass, but that's actually just from the last few weeks. All of the grass used to be like almost waist high. It was cattle feed, and that just completely burnt up.
You know, we haven't totaled the cost up. It's going to be, it's going to be way up in the millions. So most people don't realize that we got 100 miles of fence to replace. Again, we just replaced it. It costs about $25,000 for every mile. It'll take us several years to get our cow herd built back up. So that's a big time lost income. And then you got the employees. We don't want to fire everybody. We got no income, but we want to keep those guys on because they're part of the family. That doesn't even take into the fact, the mental side of it. We've gone through a lot of these fires, and we're getting pretty cold-hearted. One of our biggest problems when we're finding dead cows is you find the cows that survived. So they're completely burned up. Their udders are burned up, their legs are burned up, their eyes are burned up, their ears are burned off, but they're still alive. I realize people that watch this don't raise livestock. And they might not get the importance of it, but some of them have pets. And if I can tell you that the electrical company is going to come in there and they're going to burn your pets to death, they're going to burn some of them up, and some of them they're going to leave for you that you have to euthanize, and they're probably going to burn your house down, and they're probably going to go to the bank account and burn up every dime you've ever had, and then they're going to leave you with a bunch of bills that you need to pay now. You'd be pissed. But they put you in such a deep hole, how are you going to dig yourself out? It's like they burn up everything you got, and they've destroyed everything you've ever loved in life. And now they're saying, come after us. Come on, buddy, what do you got left?
This isn't Xcel's first time facing liability for sparking fires across the country. The company reported that in 2020, it ignited 647 fires across Colorado. Xcel also faces lawsuits that accuse it of starting the Marshall Fire in 2021, the most destructive fire in Colorado history. According to Xcel Energy's Q1 earnings, 15 lawsuits have been filed against the utility since the Smokehouse Creek fire. Xcel estimates that the company will incur a loss and accrued a liability of $215 million from the Smokehouse Creek fire. but that they have approximately $500 million of insurance to cover potential 2024 wildfire losses. So, if money doesn't seem to be an issue for Xcel, how can they be held liable while preventing a disaster like this from happening again?
There's interim measures that utilities can take to try to reduce the likelihood of their facilities sparking wildfires, even if they haven't made full-scale system upgrades, right? That looks like doing more to monitor for fire conditions, whether that be with weather stations or cameras, or having a plan in place to proactively shut off the power when the winds pick up.
The main thing is hold the utilities companies accountable. You know, they're just too cheap to go out and replace their stuff. And that's been our whole complaint.
State Representative Ken King leads the investigative committee on the Smokehouse Creek fire.
Well, I think the compensation is going to come from the private sector. It's going to come from those who started the fires. The state of Texas is not in the business of bailing anybody out.
But a major concern is that if Xcel Energy is found responsible, the utility could just increase rates for their customers to cover their bottom line.
Now, what I believe was being talked about in testimony is the utility companies will likely lobby for a rate increase. And I don't, that would not be unexpected if that happened.
The utility business model is such that customers pay for the investments needed to run, update, manage the system.
And I'm not saying they did it on purpose, but it dang sure, they're not trying not to do it, I guess. They chop a telephone pole in half and leave it standing, and it falls down and starts a fire, and it's a big fire. And it's going to give them an excuse to raise their rates.
In California, electricity rates have surged in the years following some of the deadliest fires in the state's history. Fires that were caused by the utility monopoly PG&E.
People are very unhappy about their bills right now. There's no question about that. You know, in my view, I mean, there's certainly some amount of work is absolutely critical, right? And it does come at a cost.
At some point, you got to inflict enough pain on the utility companies that they'll pay for it. But the problem with that is they've got a monopoly on the system, and then you inflict pain on it where they just pass the pain down the line to their customers who are stuck using their electricity, who don't have a choice.
So, how can ratepayers be protected in the meantime while holding utilities like Xcel Energy accountable and preventing these destructive wildfires from happening again? Some think a solution is a shift away from private investor-owned utilities to publicly owned providers. Even this guy. In a recent letter to investors, Warren Buffett said that certain utilities might no longer attract the savings of American citizens and will be forced to adopt the public power model.
Buffett was saying that we need some time to figure out what this looks like, but if utilities potentially face almost unlimited liability in the wake of wildfires ignited by their equipment, I mean, what is the investor community supposed to think? And you know, he sort of raised the prospect of what's called public power, i.e., you know, a state or municipal utility model. It's unfortunate to say, and this is not the only industry for which this is the case, but it often takes a disaster for a company to try to really reorient its way of doing business to avoid having to go through that again.
But for those left in the aftermath of the Smokehouse Creek fire, accountability needs to look like more than just promises of change.
I can't just walk away from a fight. And so if it takes me down, it takes me down. I promise you they got a bigger checkbook than me. But I'm still going to put up a fight. That's part of it. I'm sick of it. If somebody doesn't hold them accountable, and I don't mean $1 million, I mean tens of hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean take them to the ground and choke them out completely, then this problem's never going to be solved.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe to see more videos like this one. If you have ideas for topics you want More Perfect Union to cover next, drop them in the comments below.